In this section, we'll consider the neural basis of volitional imagination. We've already seen areas of the brain involved in non-voluntary modes of imagination. We saw these figures showing which areas of the cortex are activated while dreaming. We then learned that people can be induced to start lucid dreaming if the DLPFC of the frontoparietal control network is stimulated using alternating current in the low gamma range through the scalp. We've also seen that the neural circuitry associated with mental simulation, namely the default network, is activated when people are daydreaming or imagining in a mind-wandering sort of way. Now, we want to focus on the neural basis of deliberation, because deliberation is, I believe, at the very heart of what it means to have free will. We can play events out in our own internal virtual reality to see what happens. While deliberating, this is not done in a random fashion, but in light of constraints imposed by top-down cognitive areas. For example, we might play out what to make for dinner in light of various constraints, such as that one of the guests is a vegetarian. A core idea is that parts of the default network can be harnessed by the frontoparietal control network for deliberate purposes. In my own lab, in the paper shown here, we tried to see whether this is in fact the case by looking at areas of the cortex that are activated by either maintaining some shapes in working memory versus brain areas that are activated when we have to do something with those shapes in working memory. We were motivated by the kinds of constructions seen here, created by our ancestors tens of thousands of years ago. Someone, 30-odd thousand years ago, had to download a lion's head from memory, download a human body from memory as well, and then stick them together in this novel way before going and building this Löwenmensch in the world. In our study, there were 4 conditions. In the first 2 conditions, there were 4 parts, such as shown here, that could be put together to form a single larger shape. Subjects had to either remember the 4 parts without putting them together, or they had to put them together in their minds. In the other 2 conditions, they had to take a single conglomerated large shape and break it in their minds into the 4 component subshapes, or else they just had to remember the large conglomerated shape. So there were 2 mental operations, shown in red here, which were either constructing a shape or deconstructing a shape, and there were 2 maintenance conditions, shown in blue here, where they either remembered the 4 parts or remembered the single conglomerated shape. We could then see what parts of the brain were involved in mental operations, such as putting parts together or taking parts apart. And we could see what parts of the brain were involved in simply holding information in working memory. We then looked at patterns of fMRI activity in this set of regions of interest. In particular, we looked at what areas of the brain became functionally connected when maintaining information about the shapes in working memory versus when manipulating those shapes in working memory. Remember, functional connectivity just means that activity in 2 brain areas becomes more positively correlated when their functional connectivity increases. Here in red, you can see those areas of the brain that became more functionally connected when manipulating the shapes, either taking them apart or putting them together in one's internal mental workspace. And in blue, you can see those areas of the brain that became more functionally connected when maintaining a shape or shapes in working memory. Let's focus on the red connections. Basically, when subjects are carrying volitional mental operations out in the internal virtual reality of their imaginations, we can see the DLPFC, or dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, and posterior parietal cortex, or PPC, which we know to comprise the core part of the frontoparietal control network involved in volitional top-down operations. But we can also see the central involvement of the precuneus, shown here, which is part of the default network core, which most researchers believe to be involved in mental simulations. We also see the involvement of the posterior temporal lobes and the frontal operculum. What does this mean? I take this to support the position that volitional mental operations involve volitional or top-down control coming out of the frontoparietal control network, which then harnesses the internal simulation circuitry of the default network core. If free will is most fundamentally rooted in our capacity to deliberate and volitionally play scenarios out in our imagination, it is this circuitry that is at the heart of free will. In a 2018 paper related to ours, shown here, that was also in search of the neural basis of creative imagination, the authors came to a similar conclusion, namely that creative thinking involves the volitional frontoparietal control network coupling with the main hub of the default network in the posterior cingulate precuneus area. On the left, you see the cortical areas that were more active in a divergent than non-divergent thinking task. On the right, they use the posterior cingulate as a seed region to see which areas are functionally connected with it, and lo and behold, they find parts of the frontoparietal control network, in particular the RLPFC and DLPFC, and also find the anterior insula or frontal operculum, and a dorsal area near the anterior cingulate, which we know to be part of the cingulo-opercular network. We can conclude that the neural circuitry underlying the volitional use of internal simulation that underlies human deliberation and creative thinking is now being deciphered by neuroscientists. These pictures offer, in essence, a view of the neural basis of free will.